There's a difference between doing something from love and doing it because you feel like you have to. And stay with me here for a moment, because this shift doesn't happen the way people think it does. Because on the outside, it can look exactly the same. Nothing obvious changed. Nothing dramatic happened. There wasn't a big moment. There wasn't an argument that clearly marked the shift. You're still doing it, still showing up, still handling what needs to be handled, still moving the way you've always moved, still taking care of the little things that keep everything going. If someone looked from the outside, they would say everything is still working. Everything is still in place. Everything is still being held together. But inside, it feels different. And that's where confusion begins. Because now you're asking yourself, why does this feel different? I'm still doing the same thing, so why doesn't it feel the same anymore? Because sometimes nothing changes on the outside first, but how it feels changes. And that matters more than most people realize, because the feeling behind what you do is what gives it meaning. And when that feeling shifts, the same action can start landing completely differently inside of you. And that's where the quiet shift begins. Now let's slow this down, because this is where people miss it. This is where it starts shifting quietly. What used to feel natural now feels like pressure. What used to feel like care now feels expected. What used to feel light now feels like something you have to push through. And nobody announced that change. Nobody sat down and said, this is now your responsibility. This is now expected from you. That's not how it happens. It happens through repetition, through consistency, through something being done so often that it becomes part of the structure. And once something becomes part of the structure, it stops being seen the same way. It blends into the background. It becomes normal. It becomes something people rely on without thinking about it the same way they used to. And when something blends into the background, it starts to lose its visibility. What used to be noticed now goes without acknowledgement. What used to be appreciated now just happens. What used to feel like a choice starts to feel like a role. And roles carry weight, especially when they were never clearly defined, never talked about, and never meant to become permanent. Because now you're still doing the same thing, but the emotional experience of doing it has changed. And when the experience changes, the weight changes too. And I want to stay right here, because this part matters. This goes both ways. A husband may have started doing something out of love, something small, something consistent, something that made life easier. And over time, it starts feeling like something he's supposed to do, something expected, something no longer noticed the same way, something that gets missed unless it's not done. A wife may have started doing something out of love, something thoughtful, something that kept things running smoothly, something that felt natural to her. And over time, it starts feeling like it's just part of what she does, something assumed, something no longer acknowledged the same way, something that people rely on without thinking about the effort behind it. And neither one of them may be trying to hurt the other. Neither one may be intentionally taking advantage. Neither one may be aware that the meaning has changed. But when something stops feeling seen, it starts feeling different. Not because the love is gone, but because the experience of giving it has changed. And that change, even if it's quiet, is real. And this is where the real shift happens. Nobody is saying anything. There's no conversation, no pause, no moment where both people sit down and say, something about this doesn't feel the same anymore. So the action stays the same, but the feeling keeps changing, day by day, moment by moment, quietly. And this is the part people miss. The action didn't change, but the feeling did. And because nobody is naming it, nobody is addressing it. And because nobody is addressing it, it keeps growing. Because feelings that are not spoken do not stay still. They move, they deepen, they settle into the way you experience things. And now, you're not just doing something, you're feeling something while doing it. And that changes everything. And when that feeling keeps changing, it doesn't stay neutral. It grows quietly over time. Because now you're not just going through the motion, you're carrying an emotion with it. And that emotion starts shaping how you show up. You may become quieter, more reserved, less open. Not because you stop caring, but because something inside you is responding to the shift, responding to the weight, responding to the feeling of no longer being seen the same way. And that response is not always loud. Sometimes it's subtle. Sometimes it just looks like pulling back a little, saying less, giving a little less energy, holding a little more inside. Not because you plan to, but because something inside of you adjusted. Because love that feels unseen starts to feel heavier. And anything that starts feeling heavier over time will eventually change how you carry it. Now let me slow this down right here, because this part matters. Sometimes it's not about stopping what you're doing. It's about making sure it's still being seen, still being appreciated, still being acknowledged, still being chosen. Because people can carry a lot when it still feels like it matters, when it still feels like it's landing, when it still feels like it's being received. But when something no longer feels seen, the weight of it changes. And that's where awareness comes in. Because sometimes the fix is not drastic. Sometimes it's not about tearing everything down. Sometimes it's about bringing attention back to what became invisible, saying it out loud, acknowledging it, making space for it to be seen again. Because when something is seen again, it starts to feel different again. Now, if you've ever felt this, I want you to think about this for a moment. Not what you stopped doing, but what stopped feeling the same? Not the big things, but the small ones. The ones that quietly shifted over time. The ones that used to feel light and now feel heavier. The ones you're still doing, but not experiencing the same way. Because that's usually where it begins. Not in something dramatic, but in something subtle. Something that changed in feeling before it ever changed in action. Because long relationships are not just built on what people do. They're built on how what you do continues to feel. They're built on keeping the meaning alive, not just the routine. They're built on making sure that what started from love does not quietly turn into something heavier. And sometimes protecting the relationship is not about doing more. It's about paying attention to what changed before it becomes something you feel every day. Because when something is noticed early, it can be adjusted. When something is acknowledged, it can be restored. And when something is brought back into the light, it can feel like love again. And sometimes protecting the relationship is simply making sure love never quietly turns into obligation.